within the calling, when you're in the calling, the best way to balance, we always think of priority 1, 2, 3, right? God first, family second, whatever. But it really doesn't work that way. My husband says it like this: it's like a wheel. God is always at the center, always at the center. But as the wheel turns, something else is going to get a priority.
Ever wonder how pastors' wives manage to balance the demands of ministry with their personal lives? Well, today we're diving deep into the question, how do they do it? Join us today as we explore this topic in today's episode. Let's find out together. Hey guys, Regina, Ronda, welcome. I'm so honored to co-host today with you. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing well.
Thank you.
Doing well.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Yeah, today's going to be a great episode. We are talking to pastors' wives. I'm talking with pastors' wives, and we're talking about pastors' wives. And honestly, you guys do hold a unique role within ministry. And so first, let me just ask, how do you guys do it? How do you navigate the balance between life and ministry?
Oh, for me, prioritizing is as much as possible is key, and trying to keep a healthy balance between each side, but not getting tripped up when we have to lean one way or the other for a period of time. And it's okay. Everything doesn't have to be perfect. So, but prioritizing as much as possible.
I would agree, and reprioritizing, because sometimes season by season, then you have to reprioritize what is most important as we go along, and God's grace and God's help is the biggest help.
Yeah, no, those are very wise words. Well, I'm excited because Regina has invited two special guests to join us in this conversation today. And I'm just really looking forward to listening in on the words of wisdom that you guys have, because here's the thing, whether you're a pastor's wife or a credentialed minister or all of the above, we all struggle to figure out how to balance ministry with our personal lives, right? But I'm really excited for these two guests. And so first we have Karen Robertson, who has felt a call to ministry since she was 16 years old and has served alongside with her husband for more than 30 years. So I know we're going to be able to access a deep well of wisdom there. And then we have Cyndi Franklin, who she and her husband have been pastoring in the Fresno area for 30 years. And she recently received her ordination, which is so rad, but she also was one of your featured guests, Regina, at guest speakers at the Victorious Boot Camp that you just had recently for pastors' wives. And so I'm really excited to have these two women on. So let's go ahead and welcome them, shall we?
Hi.
Hi, guys.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for having me.
Welcome. Yeah, it's a pleasure. Well, we're so excited to have you guys, and I hope you don't mind. We have 3 people here today who are just going to grill you. No, I'm just kidding.
No
but
pressure,
I do
no
think,
Bring it
no
on.
pressure.
Bring
No
it on.
pressure. But I do think this is going to be a really great conversation. And so I just asked them, and I want to start off by asking you just real quick, how, first of all, share a little bit about your journey being a pastor's wife, and then how do you personally balance between ministry life and your personal lives? Karen, why don't you get us started?
Okay, well, I entered through the school of hard knocks, basically. I wasn't raised in a pastor's home, so my only experience was being in church all my life and having really strong experiences with God through my childhood and teenage years. And I loved church and everything about it. I think I was an unusual child in that sense, but I also feel like God had a call on my life all that time, and I didn't realize it until I was 16. But I especially loved the presence of God. And when I was at a youth rally at 16, that's when I felt such a strong call to dedicate my entire life to ministry. I didn't know how, what that looked like at 16. I just knew, I'd been taking piano lessons since I was in first grade. I loved singing. I was in talent contests. Anything I could do to express myself in music, I was doing it. But at 16, when I felt that call to ministry, I just you know, when I expressed it to my parents, they set me on a path to go to Bible school. So, you know, getting in depth with Bible and majoring in music was what I was doing. I was going to marry a musician in my head, in my ideal, and that's how we were going to minister to the world for God, was through music. But then I fell in love with Mike, who was he was also at SAGU, and he was pretty much a brand new Christian, and he was just at Bible school to find God's will for his life. He didn't quite yet know how that was going to be lived out. So neither one of us were thinking pastoring exactly. I certainly wasn't, but he wasn't thinking that exactly. He just was open, you know, to whatever God called him to do. But I certainly had no intention of, or it was nowhere in my mind of marrying a pastor or being a pastor's wife. My church, I guess my church had not been very kind to pastors. We went through pastors every maybe 2 to 5 years. So what I saw of pastoring was not something that was really appealing to me. I saw it more like church conflict. I felt like I lost a lot of pastors that I adored, and their wives. And I felt bad for them, you know, and even though I loved church and had strong experiences with God, that was just kind of a secondary thing. Your pastors minister to you, but you feel kind of bad for them, especially the pastors' wives. A lot of them, I only saw the back of their heads, you know, sitting on the pew. That's as much as I saw. Very few were involved in my life on a personal level, that type of thing. But meanwhile, I was immersed in the music department, and I was traveling every weekend, ministering with the singing ensemble. And Mike and I were both just happily in love and just so wide-eyed about being involved in sharing our love for God and people in our respective fields. But then he took the youth pastor role our junior year in college. And then we were married a year later, and voila, I ended up being a pastor's wife. And now I'm continuing my last year in the university, but I'm sitting on a pew, just like I didn't want to do, and not doing anything except being told what to do. And that was the start of my journey as a pastor's wife. And so when I say School of Hard Knocks, the pastor that our first pastor, where we were youth pastors, was very rigid. He was legalistic. He was controlling. He had no boundaries whatsoever. So in order to set healthy boundaries at that young age was enormous for me, because I was respectful, I was submissive, and yet I felt absolutely miserable. And his expectations of me were unrealistic. He controlled everything I did, where I could go, who I could spend time with, how to dress, be at every church activity. Even if we had an all-night sleepover with the youth, he might plan a spontaneous 8 a.m. prayer meeting that we had to be at the next morning, and we were expected to show up. So my introduction to being in the pastorate was horrifying for me. And I didn't do too well at setting healthy boundaries, because I felt lost and confused and submissive and unhappy. And I endured it for 5 years and actually became very bitter at that pastor. And so it was a journey coming through that, accepting my role, the expectations that were put on me. So I'm painting kind of a dark story, but that's how it started out for me. And it was a journey, learning how to set boundaries, learning, how to navigate that role with what I truly felt called to do, which I wasn't able to do at all the first 5 years of our marriage, our union, that we were so excited about, being in ministry. So that's probably enough for now until you ask your next question. I'll let Cyndi jump in.
Wow. I kind of was like her in the fact that Jim and I both went to Southwestern. We were both, we were traveling in a ministry group that did drama and music, and we were touring the States for the Bible college. to bring more students to the Bible college. I was not raised in a Christian home, so my extended family were all Christians. In fact, my mother was raised in church. She was one of 4 daughters that grew up in church, singing, playing the piano, and were at church all the time. Every time the doors were open, they traveled and sang and everything. But my mother and father divorced when I was 3, and my mother took off on a whole nother direction. So we moved away to Oklahoma City from Muskogee. I was born in Muskogee. I'm an Okie from Muskogee. You probably don't even know that song, but there's a song about it. And when I gave my life to the Lord at 15 and a half, I had seen everything a person could see in our home, with just every promiscuous thing you could see. And I knew that wasn't where peace was. My grandparents, my dad and his new wife, aunts and uncles, all poured into me. When I had the summers off, I would go and stay with them from house to house to house. And I just saw Jesus in action. When I would go back home, my mother had loved like crazy for me, but she didn't know how to be a good person. I mean, she never take that back. She didn't know how to live a Christian example. So she didn't want to. She got tired of the church. And thankfully, she's been saved now for the last probably 8 years. And I'm thrilled about it, how much she's submerged in Jesus. But when I was younger, I didn't know anything about, I didn't know a whole lot about church and what it required and all that. But at 15 and a half, I was going to church by myself at an Assembly of God church, and Maranatha Repertoire Company, which was the group we traveled with, was there. And they were doing services. And I had been singing since I was 5 years old. I knew I wanted to sing. I'd been prophesied over that I was going to sing to large groups of people and minister to people. So I felt like that was what God wanted me to do. So I sang like Karen in every opportunity in school and church. And I had people ask me to come and sing at pageants. So I got involved in the pageant life just a little bit, and couldn't really hack that. But did that for a little bit, became first runner-up to Miss Little Rock. I'm not sure how, but
Oh, wow.
so I kept saying yes to the Lord to find out what his direction for my life would be. Went to Bible college, met Jim when we didn't even like each other when we saw each other. I was a very conservative Pentecostal. He was a very liberal Assemblies of God person. Big afro, colored blue glasses, big giant cross around his neck. And I'm like, if this guy gets in the group, I don't want to be in it. Lo and behold, he was already in the group because he'd already been at school before me a whole year. So he was traveling. But when we started off in the same measure. When we got married, we immediately, I put him through the rest of his schooling. I worked at a bank there in Waxahachie, and we became youth pastors. Then we traveled on the road from church to church doing youth camps and conventions and stuff. But one thing we said we'd never do, 2 things we said we'd never do. Number 1, we'd never be pastors. We didn't want it. We told God we didn't want to be pastors. And the second thing, guess what it was? We would never live in California. So God laughs. He's got a really big laugh, a great sense of humor. And then we became pastors, and we have pastored we had been in the ministry for 43 years together. Wow. But we've been pastors for the last 35 of those, I think, or 36, something like that. It's been a great journey. It's been a place of learning. Yeah, I don't know what else you want me to say.
No, I think that is great. Thank you guys so much for sharing. I just wanted to follow that up with, what are some, as you've kind of been on this journey and you've experienced so much in the past few decades, what are some practical strategies that you would offer to like a younger, maybe a newer, somebody who's new at being a pastor's wife? What are some practical strategies, if you were just starting out, that you would offer to somebody to say, here's how to balance between church life, which can take over every aspect as much as you would give it, and your personal life? What are some ways that you would advise somebody who's just starting out on the journey?
Well, I would say it kind of goes back before the actual pointing. I told my kids, as I've raised them, when you date someone, if you're going to be in the ministry, you need to find someone who has a calling to be in the ministry as well. Otherwise, you're going to wreck their life. Like for my boys, I have 2 boys. If you're looking for a woman, look for someone who's already watering camels. Okay, so it's the story of when Abraham's servant went out to go find a wife for his son. She was watering camels. You need to find somebody who's already watering camels, because if you're divided in that, that's going to divide you in every situation. But then I would say within the calling, when you're in the calling, the best way to balance, we always think of priority 1, 2, 3, right? God first, family second, whatever. But it really doesn't work that way. My husband says it like this. It's like a wheel. God is always at the center, always at the center. But as the wheel turns, something else is going to get a priority. Something else is going to be setting in there. God is always at the center. He never leaves. Without putting God first and seeking him first, none of this works. But as the wheel turns, sometimes you have to, like Rhonda said a while ago, you've got to pre-prioritize. So my boys were in sports a lot, and we'd have a church service the same time they had sports. So we look at each other and go, what are we going to do? Okay, one of us has got to be there and one of us has got to be there. Okay, here we go. So, I had to take my boys to Las Vegas because my husband had a big conference that he was right in the middle of. And sometimes it works that way. Sometimes I don't get to do what I want to do, but I do what I feel is necessary. It's kind of the necessary thing, Yeah.
For us, once we took our first pastorate as lead pastors, we knew what we did not want to do after our experience as youth pastors. However, we're both type A personalities, and we do tend to just go, and probably plan more than what we are able to fulfill most of the time, especially in our younger years. With the church, the first pastorate we took was a reboot, is what you would call it today. And it ran probably 40 people on a good Sunday. And so our heart was to reach the community and build the church. And so we just massively went into it, poured ourselves into it. And when you're in your 20s, you can do that sort of thing and just kind of keep pushing. But there is a point where you begin to wear down. And over the years, I don't think it's so much a matter of getting older. It's a matter of what you've done to yourself and done to your body, done to your mental strength, your stamina, those types of things. Have you, and I know we're going to talk about self-care later, but you kind of learn those things after the fact. And I remember this one lady telling me, this was when we were planting a church in California, our second pastorate, and we had, again, we were just pushing hard to build that church. And I remember one lady telling me, Karen, you don't have to work this hard. The Lord doesn't expect this much of you. And I remember thinking, I don't think he expects this much of me. This is what I want to do. I love what I'm doing. I love ministry. And I knew she didn't get both our personalities as well as our drive to build that church and to draw more people into the Lord and then disciple them. And it's a lot of work planting a church, but we do have a tendency to go. And we found a strategy for ourselves by Rick Warren. We latched onto a statement that he made, and he talks about daily diversions, weekly withdrawals, and annual abandonment. And I think we probably have all heard that over the years, but to break it down, what we did on daily diversions, of course, when we lived in Oceanside and we were planting a church, I loved the beach. So it was easy to go for a walk every single day, or at lunchtime, go outside because it was pleasant weather, beautiful. We were there for 15 years. That was my daily diversion. When we moved to Visalia, which has extreme heat in the summertime, going for a walk outside to find other daily diversions to do besides going to a gym. And in our case, that was difficult because our church was a big fish in a small pond. So if you go to the gym, you don't actually get workouts done. You end up conversating with the people that, are in your community and know who you are. So just something simple like going to the grocery store and buying an apple became important. It just was a break, something refreshing, just something to break you away mentally, break you away from the crowd, from your staff, all that type of thing, and just having a moment. And if you do that on a daily basis, it adds up. And then weekly withdrawals, like you said, Nikki, ministry is constant. It's and you go 6 days a week and have 1 day off, supposedly. Everyone else has 2 days off. But, if the devil can't get you with sin, he'll exhaust you. And when you get exhausted, you become ineffective in what you set out to do for God's kingdom. And your fuse can become short. You can make quick decisions instead of thinking decisions through. There's just all types of ramifications when you are exhausted. And so finding weekly withdrawals, something my husband and I did, was our Friday nights was our date night. And it belonged to no one else, no matter what. We never scheduled revival meetings on those nights. We never scheduled anything but us on Friday nights. And so that was important for our relationship, and it was important for a weekly withdrawal. And we never even went, and this may sound uncaring, but it's part of the self-care. We never even went to dinner on Friday nights in the town we were ministering in. We always picked a town 45 minutes away or so and had a nice dinner that we knew we would be uninterrupted. It would just be us. So that's what we would do. We'd take that night on Friday night, and then, of course, your day off. And then annual abandonment. Of course, planning a vacation a year, that's all some people can get when they're first starting to pastor. And sometimes they can't even afford that. But to begin planning ahead for your vacation, saving up for it so it's not a drain on your budget. And not just with your family, but planning time away, even if it's just for a weekend, with your girlfriends. Maybe girlfriends from college, you all meet together in one place, or girlfriends from high school when you can. Just getting that annual abandonment. And that's how we begin to find those places of refuge and rebuilding.
We also try to keep, really things can get off balanced, and we're okay with that. We've given our life, to the Lord 100%, and ministries, we love it. But we do try to keep our Fridays also, we know if it's a planning thing, it's not going to happen on a Friday, but that things come up and emergencies happen, and we're okay with that too. But on the most part, to try to keep that 1 day that is just for you and your husband or your family, or whatever season, if you have children, or they're all different seasons. But we also try to do that, Karen, is keep that, whatever that 1 day is, as much as possible. It's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I would just say that also we try to keep Fridays to ourselves too, but it doesn't always happen. So
Yeah.
I think for us, to be real, my husband's not only a pastor, but he's also a community leader, and he's a talk show radio host, and everybody wants him. So they want him to speak at this. They want him to pray at this. They want him to raise money at this. So what we've done is, when it's a Friday, we take a different day that week off. Okay, we can't do Friday this week, but guess what? We're going to go away for 2 days and go spend the night, somewhere, go to the coast, whatever. So we make concession. You can't do that if you're not a very organized person. Mm-hmm. So my thing is, you need to keep a calendar. You need to know where you're going that week, what's coming up, so that it's not a surprise. Because when it becomes a surprise, I've got to be at this place somewhere. No, you didn't tell me. That's when it gets hard. That's when your heart gets hurt. But if you can keep a schedule, I've got a calendar everywhere. Everywhere. So that I'm telling myself, this is where we're going to be this night. This is where we're going to be that night, blah, 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 blah. And when we can make that one day for ourselves, it's very special. We make it very special. We've also raised our kids in that way so that when something hits one of our birthdays, I've got people around me that are like, oh no, we can't be there because it's our birthday. I'm like, it's a day. It's a day on the calendar. Who knows that it's that day? I mean, your kid's 2 years old. How are they going to know what day that is? You know, there should be a day celebrated. Don't get me wrong. This is just my opinion. There should be a day that's celebrated for that birthday. But sometimes we have to move our birthday to the next day or move it to the next one, whatever. I think there has to be concessions made. That's why that wheel, Christ is in the center of the wheel. So we love Jesus. We want to work for Jesus. We want to do everything we can. But we also need to make some priorities for some other things in our life. If my kids need us to be somewhere, we're going to be there. If we need to take a day or two off or take a weekend off, that's very hard for pastors to do, especially busy pastors. It's very hard, but we're learning to take it off and let somebody else have it, and let's just get away somewhere. And I'm telling you, that's freeing, very freeing.
I was just going to add to that almost exactly, Cyndi, that we have learned that over time we have to celebrate the event. We can't just focus on the day or our anniversary or that sort of thing, because otherwise it can be really disappointing. And I know a lot of pastors' wives kind of get hung up on that. Well, but they want me to be at church on my birthday, and I'm like, well, yeah, Sunday's coming. You know, that's our Super Bowl. You got to be there. And so then we have to plan to, you know, celebrate it another time. Not that it's not important, but it just, if you kind of get in that mindset that we're going to celebrate, but it doesn't necessarily have to be on that day, it just kind of helps the flow of still celebrating, but then not getting caught up or bitter or frustrated when things conflict with those special times that still need to be special, but can't always land on the same day. I agree with you, Cyndi.
Yeah.
That's really good. I love how we've touched on different aspects of this life versus ministry balance in how you deal with the church calendar. And even it's kind of morphed into how you kind of keep your most critical relationships healthy, such as going away with your husband or making sure you guard that one night a week, being flexible. But Karen, you mentioned a phrase a little while ago, self-care. Can we talk about that for a minute? What do you do to make sure yourself, your spiritual health, your mental health, your physical health, what do you do to make sure that yourself is being cared for in the midst of all of the activities that are pulling at you, that are trying to garner for your attention? How do you care for yourself?
Yeah. Well, again, that's something I have to be very intentional about, because I love work. And I love ministry, and I'm not saying that to pat myself on the back. It's. I mean, I was called to it, so I love it, right? You love what God calls you to, and they say if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. Well, that's true and not true, because you may be enjoying it, but you can get exhausted. It can be a good tired, but it's still tired. And one thing that we've always done, my husband has always made room, even when we were in reboot for the first pastorate and church planning for the second pastorate, he always made room in the church budget for us to go to conferences. And we would go separately. I would go to music conferences, worship conferences. He would do his thing, but that was a way of filling my cup. Because I didn't have to come up with all the ideas. I got ideas from conferences, and just hanging and rubbing shoulders with people like you, that camaraderie that you experience. That was a way I filled my cup for ministry. The way I filled my cup for myself, walking is my favorite thing to do. It clears my head. It gives me more energy. It helps me sleep better. I can never work and exercise at the level I used to, because that will deplete my adrenals again. Forever, my doctor said. But a daily walk, it not for exercise purposes, even though it's good for you, but to clear my head. It gives you energy. It helps you sleep better, and all those things are important to keep you functioning at your optimum.
That's good. What about you, Cyndi?
You know, I think the most important thing is like Karen said, is listening to your body. But I have always taken a nap on Sunday afternoons. I don't know if everybody's like that, but learned it from my dad and his wife. Like there was a time where you just like shut the door and everybody gets calm for a while. And my body's ready for it. So on Sunday afternoon, when we're done, I'm home. I'm getting in my bed. I'm gonna take a nap. I don't know why. I don't need one any other day of the week, but I have it on Sunday. So self-care, I think, is just, making sure that you do stuff that allows you to breathe and allows you to think and allows you to get back to yourself. We're so in the ministry, you're surrounded with people. I mean, we can't go anywhere without people saying, "Oh, you're Pastor Franklin." We've been in Washington, D.C., we've been in Mexico, we've been in Hawaii, and people know who he is, not me, but him. But it's because of his radio. But we have to make time to do those things. I think it's really important when we take off and we go to the movies. We love to go to the movies, and I don't care what it is. It's just, let's sit and just, amusement. The word muse means to think. The word amuse means to stop thinking. And when you need some rest, one of the best things you can do is stop thinking. I don't know. We're creatives too. We're constantly thinking. So you're thinking about what I can do about this. Who needs what? Am I going to get it right? There's so much going on up in here that you have to have amusement. You have to have that time to just, and I think that's part of Sabbath. I think that's why God said we need to have a Sabbath. What's Sabbath? Sabbath is stopping the creative windmills and starting to just, be amused. My husband is the most amusing person. He is a lot like Mike. They have a lot of funny, their nature is just funny. In college, I could tell you some stories, but I won't. They're hilarious. So to get away from all of that, it's not to leave the ministry, but just for a moment, it can be a small moment, but that it replenishes you. It allows you to be free. Mm-hmm. I also agree with conferences. I think those are important too, just to get away and learn from somebody else. Watching ministries on, now we have the convenience of being able to watch things on YouTube and Facebook and whatever that we can glean from as well. I think those are also healthy for us. I think the most important of all things, though, is just staying attentive to his voice. Mm-hmm. Because he's always speaking, and he knows right where we are and where we need to be. And if we listen to his voice, Jesus said, "My sheep know my voice." That's right. And so we listen to his voice and we obey his voice. He can make things happen for us a lot better. Sometimes we need to put our phone on silent and not answer people's phone calls. I don't like to let people be so accessible, because otherwise everybody's calling you about every problem, everything. Doesn't mean that I'm not accessible to people at all, but there is a route they can go through. They can go to the church. They can call. Anything that's an emergency, that it's important, is going to get to me. But, just the person who wants you to hold their hand through everything, I think we're past that these days. I think there's still people that want to do that, but I think it's important for us as pastors' wives, especially. They'll come to us to get to our husbands. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important that we just have to moderate whatever phone calls are coming through. Okay, I'm gonna let that one go to voicemail. It's okay. It's going to be there. Nothing's going to change. And then you decipher whether it's somebody that really is going to need some help, if there's anything you can do to help them. But I think that's what helps for self-care. Mm-hmm.
That's such good stuff. One of the things that I'm a big student of health, and not because I went to college for nutrition, but through the Holy Spirit just leading me, as I too, Karen, had a breaking point I won't go into the whole story, but at 42, with just trying to do all the things that is expected, it seemed, of the pastor's wife, and not really anybody instructing me or available that I could really felt like I could ask how I do all these things. But I put my body through a hard stress. And I really felt the Lord on many things, especially the mind and the mindset and the thoughts and all that, being healthy in your mind, but is my body and nutrition. Nutrition is big. I learn a lot about it. I'm very disciplined in nutrition, especially as you get, over 50, things change, and it really is helpful, but it's helpful in ministry. It's helpful so I can sleep well, and, unhealthy habits lead to detrimental things in our bodies. So nutrition has been a big key for me, and it has worked. And I really felt it was spirit led just to help me keep my body healthy.
Good point, Regina. I was just going to add to one of the, it sounds like we're all very similar in how we function and how busy our lives are. And I think one of the things that the Lord has taught me is that I need to constantly ask him, what is it that he wants me to be doing? Because you go into any church situation and everybody wants you to do, the list is long and it's demanding. And yet I know when we went to Victorville, I needed to say, okay, Lord, I can't do this and this and this and this. And this is what's before me. What is it that you want me to do? And then it's really easy then to go back to people and say, I'm sorry that you would like me to do this, but God's not telling me to do this right now. And first and foremost, I need to answer to what he's asking me to do. And then it kind of takes the pressure off. And even if people are not happy, it's easy to say, okay, but I answer to God first. And when he says, I need to do this, that's what I have to do, even if it's not what you would necessarily want me to do. And that's just kind of help take the pressure off, listening to the Holy Spirit and having him lead and guide. Then it kind of helps to replace those demands that, seem to weigh heavily sometimes if we let them.
Yeah, I like that, Rhonda. And the one of the things I learned to do with that, because my focus definitely was worship for the majority of things I did, but the expectations people put on you, not as a minister in the church, but as the wife of the pastor, it comes from their backgrounds and their expectations of what a pastor's wife should be. And that was really hard for me at first, because I thought, this is not why I'm here. I have a call on my life. And, but I knew I had to learn how to handle those things carefully, because I realized those people have those expectations from wherever they came from, whatever their background was. But what I learned to do with them was to say, that I can see that's really important to you. And I see that could be a great asset for our church for that to happen. Why don't you and I have lunch? Let's talk over some ideas. Let's find some leadership for that area. And let's see if God's speaking to someone else when you're talking about doing only what God is speaking to you to do, what you said. And then that puts a little of the responsibility on the people to become involved in what they think the church should be doing. And that usually either quieted the people and I didn't hear about it anymore, because that's not what they were telling me. They wanted me to make something happen. Or it opened up their minds and their hearts to other possibilities. And either they felt a call toward it, or they could be the network out there among the people that got someone else interested in taking part in that.
Good. Yeah, I think too that we're here. There's a lot of times for me, I want to do everything. I'm a creative as well. I like to do things. I can do a lot of things. And I don't say that boastfully. I'm just saying, like, I have an ability to do quite a few things. But I've told my ladies from the very beginning, if you want a craft show, you want a quilting class, you're not looking at me. I'm not the one. I can do all those things. I can, but I don't want to. So we're not going to have tea parties. We're not going to have whatever. But what we're here to do is to build them up. So just like you said, Karen, let's find a person. And if that's you, maybe God's calling you to do that. I want to get behind you. I've learned to do that. Not only that, but also in the ministry, we have kind of conditioned our people that because there are so many expectations on us, we're not going to be at everybody's birthday party. We're not going to be at every wedding. We can't. There's no way we can. We'll send a gift. We'll acknowledge that it's happening, send a card or whatever, but there's no way we can do that. And as I said, my husband is part of a civic minded, like he's in anytime because he's a radio pundit and we're all God and country and, political and all that kind of stuff as well. We're asked to be at a whole lot of things, but there's some things we can't attend. And so we just have to say no to some things. But again, I think that's where you pray and you ask the Lord, like we've all said, which ones pertinent. Which one's the one you want me to be at? What do you want me to do? And then answer the call that way. But my point was, we're here to build up other people and teach them the ministry. He appointed pastors and prophets and evangelists. He appointed us to help other people do ministry, right? If we're doing it all, they're not. So
Exactly.
we have to get better at doing that.
And you know what? You will hear from other people, for those pastors' wives out there that are in this process of learning these things. You will hear from people that won't be happy that you've decided not to show up at the 50s plus dinner. You will hear from people on anything you decide to not show up at. But if you can get to the place to make that okay, that they're not okay, realizing your eye is always on the bigger picture. Theirs is always on the thing right in front of them. And be okay with some people just not being happy, kind of like you are with your kids sometimes when you have to draw the line. They're not happy and you know it, but you're okay with that because you've got the bigger picture in mind. And that's a hard thing for females to do, I think. And then if you're a feeler, if you know your personality, which I think is so important for self-care, that you take a personality test as well as a leadership profile test. Know who you are, what affects you, know what you can handle and what you can't handle. And if you happen to be a feeler like I am, and that kind of comes with the creative temperament, you feel deeply. That's what makes you good at what you do, but it's also what can make you want to jump off a river bridge, So you find those parts of your personality, you find the flip side of it, and you realize, okay, this is where I'm weak. I've got to learn some coping skills in this area so that this doesn't hurt my feelings when this person says that. And there were times when, there are people who love to come to you and tell you something certain people are saying. And I remember this one young female, she was very young, and she just loved to tell me about this one particular person, everything they would say. And I finally told her one day, I said, listen, I really don't need to hear everything they say about me. I don't want to hear what they have to say. So you're going to have to bear that load yourself, because I don't want you to tell me anything else. They're saying I'm better off not knowing. And so just drawing those kinds of lines and learning to keep your ears open to the positive things people are saying about you and the choices you're making, because you know your heart's right. You know you're giving everything you can. So the crowds, Jesus even had the crowds mumbling about what he would and wouldn't do, where he would or wouldn't go. He had that. Why would we expect that we don't have to deal with that too? We just have to learn how to deal with it. And if you know your personality, if you know your temperament, then you know where those areas are and what you need to start doing to build coping skills in those areas. Sometimes, to add to that, sometimes you can be a mouthy person, like that's part of your temperament. And you just want to mouth out what you think without thinking about it. You speak before you think. And that can get you in trouble when you're in a leadership position. So even learning to curb that type of thing, because you know your personality, instead of thinking, well, this is just how I am. Well, yeah, it is just how you are. But do you want to deal with the consequences that come with being just how you are? So that's a great thing that I learned and listened to and worked with for myself over the years.
That's really good. I'm just so grateful that you guys have been on this podcast, that you've been so vulnerable and just shared. I mean, when I said we were going to do a deep dive, I feel like we literally did a deep dive. So thank you guys so much for sharing your wisdom. Thank you, Cyndi. Thank you, Karen, and Rhonda and Regina. It is always a pleasure to co-host these episodes with you guys. I'm just so grateful that we got to talk about this, because I feel like regardless of your role, this is something that is relatable to women everywhere. So thank you for your wisdom and all of the words that you had today. And for those of you who are watching, thank you so much for joining us again for another episode of the Women of SoCal Leadership Podcast. We hope that you will find us online wherever you happen to watch the these, whether it's on social media, on YouTube, or if you're just listening on iTunes or Spotify, find us for the next episode, because we want to make sure that we're able to equip you in your leadership skills so that you can go and be a better minister of the gospel. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.